Good evening. Tonight we will drift into the quiet world of ancient China, where the Great Wall stretched endlessly over rugged mountains, guarding secrets whispered by the wind. The sun hung low behind jagged peaks, casting long shadows over the sprawling ramparts of the Great Wall. Its weathered stones, darkened by centuries of rain and dust, wound their way like a restless serpent through the dense forests and rocky cliffs of northern China. A faint chill tingled the air, borne on the breath of an early autumn evening. The scent of damp earth mingled with the faint aroma of burning pine from distant watchfires, while the slow rustling of leaves whispered stories older than any man standing guard. The wall itself was no mere barrier of stone. It was a living monument, a boundary not only between lands but between worlds, civilization and wilderness, order and chaos, safety and peril. The stones were rough and uneven beneath the fingertips of the sentries who paced along its battlements, their worn leather boots tapping a steady rhythm against the cold surface. Here, under a sky fading from amber to deep indigo, the vastness of the empire's edge revealed itself in every curve of the wall, every crooked tower standing vigilant like silent sentinels watching over the vast emptiness beyond. The weather had turned crisp, and the scent of drying grass mingled with faint traces of smoke curling from scattered hearths. The landscape stretched wide, distant hills fading into a misty blue, sparse groves of twisted pines clinging stubbornly to rocky soil, and narrow trails winding along ridges and valleys. The silence was vast but not empty. It was filled with subtle sounds, the distant cry of a hawk, the gentle hum of insects settling into the night, the low murmur of the wind threading through narrow gaps in the stone. The wall breathed with the land, an ancient beast resting, vigilant yet still. Among the shadows, the watchtowers stood like looming guardians, tall and square, their wooden beams darkened by years of sun and storm. The faint flicker of torchlight danced behind narrow windows, illuminating the faces of the sentries within. Faces carved by hardship, lined with exhaustion and quiet resolve. Their coarse woolen robes rustled softly as they moved, and the thin, threadbare scarves wrapped around their necks bore the faint scent of smoke and sweat. These men lived at the edge of empire, where days and nights bled into one another beneath an endless sky. Their eyes, sharp and unblinking, scanned the horizon in slow, deliberate sweeps. The hands gripping their spears were calloused, fingers steady despite the creeping cold. Their breaths came out in small, misty clouds that vanished quickly into the air. Each man was a fragment of the wall itself, hardened by solitude and a silent oath to protect the land beyond from dangers unseen but ever-present. Nearby, small encampments nestled within the folds of the terrain, crude yet enduring. Worn tents patched with leather and cloth clustered around flickering fires, their glow casting gentle light on faces hardened by seasons of vigilance. The murmurs of low conversations faded quickly into the night, muffled by the weight of the stone barrier. The smell of roasting grain and bitter herbs wove through the air, comforting yet stark reminders of a life lived in constant readiness. The world beyond the wall was vast and wild, an endless expanse of forests and steppes, a domain where shadows moved with a life of their own. The distant howls of wolves punctuated the quiet, a chilling reminder of the dangers that prowled just out of sight. The sentries knew these sounds well. They were the lullabies of the borderlands, reminders of the fine line between safety and chaos. Their vigilance was not merely duty, it was survival. Within the watchtowers, the flickering light revealed faces marked by solitude and discipline. Their eyes carried stories without words, the weight of long nights spent in silence, the burden of loneliness, and the quiet acceptance of an existence measured in endless watches. Each movement was precise, each gesture deliberate. The slow tightening of a cloak, the careful stoking of a fire, the soft creak of wooden beams settling under the chill of night. The Great Wall was more than stone and mortar. It was a place of ritual and rhythm. At dusk, the sentries performed the slow, measured rituals passed down through generations, cleaning their weapons with steady hands, offering quiet prayers to unseen spirits, lighting fires that pierced the darkness with small points of warmth and light. These acts grounded them, tethering their spirits to a fragile sense of order amid the vast wilderness. As night deepened, a pale moon rose above the ridge, casting a silver glow over the landscape. The stones of the wall shimmered faintly in its light, revealing the rough textures and weathered cracks that told of centuries under sun and storm. The wind carried a chill now, weaving through narrow gaps in the battlements, its mournful song echoing across the silent expanse. Below, the forests seemed to hold their breath. Shadows lengthened and shifted, creating shapes that danced just beyond the edge of vision. The sentries listened carefully to the rhythm of the night, attuned to every sound. A twig snapping underfoot, the distant cry of a lone bird, the whispered rush of wind through branches. Each noise was a thread woven into the tapestry of watchfulness, a constant reminder of the fragile boundary between peace and peril. The men who stood upon the wall were bound by duty and solitude. Their lives were carved from the stone beneath their feet, shaped by the slow passing of days and nights marked only by changing light and weather. They were the silent guardians of an empire's edge, shadows themselves, blending into the night yet holding the line against the unknown. The slow, deliberate pacing along the ramparts was both comfort and burden. It was a rhythm as old as the wall itself, a heartbeat echoing through time. With every step, the sentries carried the weight of history and hope, of fear and endurance. Their stories were not spoken aloud, but etched quietly in the lines of their faces, the steady grip of their hands, the watchful glint in their eyes. As the hours stretched onward, the vast silence embraced the wall once more. The glow from the watchfires flickered low, casting long shadows that merged with the dark. The wind softened to a whisper, and the land seemed to exhale, settling into a fragile peace beneath the moonlit sky. Here, at the edge of the ancient world, life was measured in moments of stillness and vigilance, in the quiet passing of night, and in the endless song of stone and wind. The Great Wall held its secrets close, a silent witness to the lives that had passed through its shadow, and to those who remained, watching, waiting, guarding the fragile line between worlds. The first light of dawn was but a whisper on the horizon, soft and pale, a tentative brush of color against the heavy cloak of night. The sky shifted gradually from deepest indigo to a muted wash of lavender and gray. A cool mist clung low to the valleys below, drifting like a silken veil through the trees and crags, weaving among the stones of the wall itself. The air was crisp, tinged with the subtle fragrance of wet moss and cold earth. It carried a stillness that seemed almost sacred, as though the world held its breath in reverence before the slow awakening of day. Along the battlements, the sentries stirred from their long watches, their movements slow and deliberate, attuned to the gentle cadence of the morning. The rustling of coarse cloth and the faint creak of leather armor were the only sounds disturbing the fragile quiet. Their faces, pale in the dawn light, showed traces of sleeplessness and quiet fatigue, but also an unyielding resolve. Eyes that had scanned the darkness now adjusted to the soft glow, ever watchful, ever steady. The watchtowers caught the first rays of the sun, their angular shadows retreating as the light spread across the rugged landscape. From here, the endless sprawl of hills and forests seemed to stretch beyond the limits of sight, a vast kingdom of green and stone and mist. Birds stirred in the thickets, their songs delicate threads weaving through the cool air, while far below, the slow pulse of life stirred in the villages nestled beyond the wall's protective reach. The sentries moved with practiced grace, cleaning their weapons and tending to their gear with careful hands. The ritual was quiet but exacting, each spearhead polished until it gleamed dully in the light, each leather strap adjusted to fit just so. The repetition brought calm, a steady rhythm to the uncertain world they guarded. Between these moments, their gazes wandered to the land beyond, where the unknown waited patiently. In the fading shadows of the watchtower, the worn wooden floors creaked softly beneath their feet. the scent of aged timber mixed with the lingering smoke of last night's fire, a faint reminder of warmth and human presence amid the vast solitude. A kettle sat poised to boil, its quiet hiss soon to fill the air with the promise of hot tea, a small comfort against the biting chill. These men were bound not only by duty but by an unspoken brotherhood forged in the crucible of isolation. Their eyes, hardened by countless nights spent facing the dark unknown, betrayed a loneliness tempered by shared endurance. The small gestures, the nod of acknowledgement, the shared silence, spoke volumes in the absence of words. Here, where the empire's vastness felt overwhelming, their unity was the slender thread holding back the creeping shadows. Beyond the wall, the wilderness awaited with its timeless secrets. The distant peaks, their craggy faces softened by morning haze, seemed almost dreamlike. Between trees, the flicker of deer moving cautiously among the underbrush, the faint rustle of small creatures stirring to life. The line between the known and the wild was thin here, and every sound held meaning. As the sun climbed slowly, the wall began to warm beneath its touch, the cold stones radiating a muted heat. The sentries adjusted their cloaks, the fabric heavy with dew, and prepared for the long hours ahead. The rituals of the night gave way to the steady, measured pace of day. Patrols along the battlements, silent observation, the occasional call exchanged in low tones. Each moment passed with a quiet weight, an enduring vigil in a land where time seemed to fold upon itself. Yet, even in this ordered routine, a subtle tension lingered. The border was never truly safe. Stories whispered through the centuries spoke of shadowy figures moving beyond the trees, of hostile tribes testing the limits of the empire's reach. The sentries knew these tales well, and the night's quiet was often shattered by sudden alarms or distant echoes that stirred their nerves. But for now, in this fragile dawn, all was still. The great wall stood unwavering, a testament to human will against the vast, untamed wilds. It bore the weight of history and hope, of fear and courage, in every stone and every shadow. And along its ancient ramparts, the sentries continued their watch, guardians of a fragile peace woven through time. The morning light deepened slowly, spilling over the rugged contours of the northern landscape. The mist that had clung low to the valleys began to dissipate, revealing the dense forests and rocky outcrops that stretched beyond the wall's protective embrace. The scent of pine and damp earth grew stronger, mingling with the faint, acrid trace of smoke from distant village hearths. Here, the world was painted in muted hues, soft greens, earthy browns, and the pale stone of the wall itself, worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. The sentries moved steadily along the battlements, their footsteps muffled by the worn stone. Their leather armor bore the marks of countless seasons, scratches and faded patches where the dye had long since washed away. Each man carried the weight of his post with quiet dignity, eyes fixed beyond the horizon where the wilderness waited, silent and vast. Their hands gripped spears with steady resolve, though the cold bit through their worn gloves, and the chill of the morning seeped into their bones. Small moments shaped their days, pausing to peer through narrow slits in the watchtowers, listening to the distant call of birds, or tracing the patterns of clouds drifting lazily overhead. The rhythm of patrols was slow and deliberate, as if the very stones beneath their feet dictated a steady heartbeat to which their lives were bound. Time stretched and folded in the stillness, each hour marked less by events than by a sense of enduring presence. Between patrols, the men sought brief respite in the quiet corners of the fortifications. Some tended to simple repairs, mending leather straps, sharpening blades, or reinforcing wooden beams that groaned under the weight of years. The scent of pine resin and fresh cut wood mingled with the ever-present dust and stone, grounding the fortress in the material world even as it stood at the edge of the unknown. Beyond the walls, the land whispered of old secrets. The ancient forests held shadows that shifted with the wind, where animals moved unseen and the ground was littered with fallen leaves and broken branches. The The sentries knew these woods were both protector and threat, a tangled refuge for creatures both benign and wild. At times, flickers of movement caught the eye. A deer slipping between trees, a hawk circling high above, or the sudden rustle of leaves signaling some small creature's passage. The villagers beyond the wall lived lives shaped by the same landscape and fears. Their smoke rose in thin spirals from chimneys scattered across the rolling hills, and the distant sound of labor, axes striking wood, the soft murmur of voices, rose faintly on the breeze. The sentries sometimes imagined those lives as a distant warmth, separate from their cold vigil, tethered by duty yet worlds apart in experience. Throughout the day, the sun arced slowly across the sky, shifting the play of light and shadow over the wall's uneven stones. The towers cast long, cool shadows that crept across the ramparts, offering brief relief from the sun's warmth. Dust motes floated lazily in shafts of sunlight, catching the light like tiny stars suspended in air. The quiet was punctuated only by the occasional call, sharp and low, between sentries, or the distant bark of a dog from the settlements below. As the afternoon wore on, a subtle change came with the shifting light. The air grew stiller, the sounds softer. The wall seemed to breathe beneath the slow turning of the day, its stones warming and cooling in a silent, ancient rhythm. The sentries remained vigilant, their gazes sweeping the horizon with quiet intent, attuned to the faintest sign of movement or sound. The rituals of watch persisted without haste or fanfare. Each man understood the sacredness of his role, the fragile balance he maintained between the ordered world within the wall and the untamed wild beyond. Their lives were marked by repetition and patience, a slow unfolding of moments held together by silent resolve. The Great Wall was a place of paradox, a fortress and a frontier, a prison and a refuge. It was the pulse of an empire, measured in stone and shadow, in the slow passage of time and the enduring watch of its guardians. Here, on the edge of the known world, life moved with the rhythm of the earth itself, steady, unyielding, and eternal. As dusk began to creep over the distant hills, the sentries prepared once more for the coming night, when shadows would lengthen and the wall's quiet vigilance would deepen into the stillness of darkness. As twilight surrendered to night, the landscape transformed beneath a canopy of stars, casting a gentle hush over the Great Wall and its guardians. The chill deepened, threading through the folds of worn cloaks and settling into the bones of the watchmen. Above, constellations traced silent paths across the vast sky, their cold light mingling with the faint glow of lanterns flickering within the watchtowers. The air carried the faint scent of wood smoke, mingling with the earth's cool breath and the lingering aroma of pine resin. The wall, in the pale moonlight, appeared as a silent ribbon of stone and shadow, winding endlessly over hills and valleys. Each battlement and tower stood as a solemn monument to human endurance and resolve, their outlines softened by the gentle embrace of night. The rough texture of the stone underfoot was barely visible, yet deeply felt, a tactile reminder of the unyielding foundation beneath their watch. Within the towers, the sentries settled into their positions, faces drawn and shadowed, eyes keen despite the fatigue that weighed heavily upon them. Their hands rested lightly on weapons polished smooth by countless nights of vigilance, fingers steady against the cold. The quiet murmurs of shared prayers or brief acknowledgments passed silently between them, a subtle language forged in solitude and necessity. The night was alive with small sounds, the distant cry of a lone owl, the rustling of leaves stirred by a soft breeze, the faint crackle of embers in a dying fire. These were the nocturnal hymns of the borderlands, a delicate symphony that underscored the fragile peace maintained by watchful eyes. The sentries listened intently, attuned to every whisper carried on the wind, prepared to respond to threats that might arise from the shadowed wilderness beyond. The chill seeped deeper as hours passed, but the men remained vigilant, their breaths rising in ephemeral clouds that dissolved into the night air. The rhythm of their footsteps along the battlements was slow and deliberate, a measured cadence that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the wall itself. With each step, they bore witness to the passage of time and the enduring solitude that marked their existence. The lanterns within the towers cast flickering pools of light, creating shifting patterns of shadow that danced upon the walls. These ephemeral shapes seemed to breathe alongside the sentries, joining in the silent watch. The muted glow illuminated faces etched with quiet resolve, eyes reflecting the pale light like distant stars, unwavering in their steadfast guard. Beyond the immediate vicinity of the wall, the darkness held untold mysteries. The dense forests and rugged terrain concealed figures both natural and unknown. Wild beasts stalking unseen, whispered legends of shadowy tribes that roamed beyond the Empire's grasp. The sentries knew these stories well, their minds ever alert to the possibility of movement just beyond sight. Yet the night carried a strange serenity as well, a stillness that invited reflection and quiet strength. The sentries found in this calm a fragile respite, a momentary easing of the ever-present tension. Their thoughts drifted to distant homes, to families left behind, and to the unchanging rhythm of duty that bound them to the wall. As the hours waned toward the faint promise of dawn, the watch continued uninterrupted. The stones of the Great Wall absorbed the cold and silence, holding the memories of countless nights like this one. The sentries, shadows among shadows, remained the eternal guardians, silent, steady, and unyielding, anchored in their watch beneath the vast, indifferent sky. The faintest blush of dawn began to touch the eastern sky, dissolving the heavy darkness that had cloaked the Great Wall through the long night. The stars faded slowly, their cold glimmers extinguished by the growing light. A soft, silvery haze lingered over the hills and valleys, veiling the land in a quiet stillness. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of frost-touched grass and the distant hint of smoke from morning fires kindled in the villages below. The sentries, weary but unbroken, maintained their vigil as the world shifted around them. Their breath rose in gentle puffs, disappearing into the cool morning air, while their eyes scanned the horizon with unrelenting focus. The stone beneath their feet was chilled from the night's lingering cold, yet their steady footsteps marked the slow, deliberate patrol along the wall's ancient ramparts. The rising sun cast pale gold over the landscape, touching the weathered stones and wooden towers with a fleeting warmth. Shadows retreated, slipping away from the crevices and battlements where they had nested through the night. The forests beyond the wall awakened with soft murmurs, the rustling of leaves, the stirring of small creatures in the underbrush, the faint song of birds greeting the new day. Within the watchtowers, the men moved with practiced grace, their movements measured and unhurried. Some tended to the small fires still glowing faintly, coaxing them back to life with gentle breaths and steady hands. Others cleaned their weapons, the dull glint of metal catching the morning light. Each task was performed in solemn rhythm, part of a timeless routine that wove the centuries into the very fabric of the wall. The scent of pine and earth mingled with the faint aroma of herbs carried by the breeze. This was the land's breath, ancient and enduring, whispered through the rustle of trees and the distant flow of rivers hidden beyond the rocky ridges. The wall itself seemed to awaken, its stones absorbing the light and warmth as if drawing strength from the dawn. The sentries' faces were lined and weathered, marked by countless seasons spent in service. Their eyes held the quiet wisdom of those who had learned to read the subtle signs of the borderlands, the shifting patterns of clouds, the faintest movements in the distance, the delicate balance between peace and danger. Though their words were few, their presence spoke volumes, a steadfast commitment to a duty that transcended time. Beyond the wall, the villages began to stir more fully. Smoke curled steadily from chimneys, mingling with the morning air as the first laborers took up their tools. The muted sounds of daily life, hammer striking wood, the low murmur of voices, the distant bark of dogs, reached the sentries like a soft promise, a tether to a world beyond their solitary watch. Yet the wilderness remained close, a constant reminder of the fragile boundary they defended. The forests stretched endlessly, their shadows deepening in the folds of the land. Here, unseen eyes watched from the darkness, and the silence held secrets as old as the stones beneath the sentry's feet. As the day advanced, the light shifted and changed, revealing new facets of the landscape: the rugged cliffs, the winding paths, the scattered settlements clinging to the edges of empire. The wall stood resolute, a silent guardian carved into the earth, bearing witness to the unceasing passage of time and the lives that had passed through its shadow. The rhythm of the sentry's patrol continued, steady and unbroken. With each step, they traced the thin line between safety and the unknown, between the ordered world and the wild beyond. Their watch was a quiet song of endurance, a testament to the resilience of those who stand between worlds. As the sun climbed higher, the wall and its guardians settled into the slow cadence of day, the vastness of the land stretching out beneath an endless sky. Here, amid stone and shadow, life moved with a gentle persistence, quiet, enduring, eternal. The day wore on with a patient and measured pace, the sun tracing its slow arc across the broad, pale sky. The heat was gentle, a soft caress rather than a burning glare, filtered through a thin veil of clouds that drifted lazily above the great wall. Beneath this muted light, the stones of the ramparts gleamed with a faint warmth, their surfaces smoothed by centuries of wind, rain, and countless footsteps. Each weathered block was a silent witness to the ages, holding stories of vigilance, endurance, and unspoken sacrifice. The sentries continued their watch with quiet determination, their figures moving steadily along the battlements, casting long shadows that stretched and folded over the ancient wall. Their garments were heavy with dust and sweat, faded from the relentless passage of seasons. Yet each man bore his burden with unyielding resolve. The worn leather of their armor creaked softly with every movement, blending with the subtle sounds of the morning, the distant chirp of cicadas, the faint rustle of leaves, and the occasional sharp call of a hawk circling far above. Life on the wall was a careful balance of solitude and shared purpose. Between patrols, the men exchanged few words, their communications terse and deliberate, carried in low tones that barely disturbed the pervasive stillness. The bond among them was forged not in conversation but in a shared understanding of the wall's sacred duty, a fragile barrier between the known and the wild, the safe and the unknown. They were the invisible line upon which the fate of empires teetered, shadows cast by stone and duty. The landscape beyond the wall was vast and untamed. Thick forests sprawled across hills and valleys, their dense canopies alive with the sounds of hidden life. Streams wound silently through the underbrush, their waters cool and clear, reflecting patches of sky through breaks in the foliage. The earth was rich with the scent of pine and damp leaves, the subtle fragrance of wild herbs carried on the breeze. Here, the wilderness breathed deeply, indifferent to the fragile human boundaries etched across its expanse. Within this world, the sentries moved like quiet ghosts, their senses sharpened by endless nights and days of watchfulness. Their eyes scanned the horizon, searching for signs of movement, an errant shadow, a distant shape against the skyline, the faintest ripple in the still air. Their ears caught every sound, from the rustle of small creatures through dry leaves to the distant murmur of voices carried faintly on the wind. Every detail was recorded, catalogued in a mind trained to detect the subtle shifts that might signal danger. Despite the gravity of their charge, moments of unexpected grace and beauty occasionally pierced the monotony. A sudden breeze might stir the heavy curtains of mist clinging to the trees, revealing shafts of sunlight that dappled the wall's surface in shifting patterns. A lone bird's song could rise clear and pure, echoing off the stones and across the silent valleys. These small miracles, fleeting and fragile, served as reminders of the delicate harmony that persisted even at the empire's edge. The sentries' rituals continued with steadfast regularity. Each man tended carefully to his weapons, oiling blades and inspecting spearheads for chips and cracks. The leather straps and armor were repaired with practiced hands, thread by thread, stitch by stitch. Fires were stoked to keep the chill at bay during brief rest periods, the smoke curling lazily into the sky, a quiet signal of life amid the vast stillness. These acts, repetitive and solemn, were anchors in a world defined by uncertainty. The weight of history pressed heavily here. The Great Wall was more than stone and mortar. It was the embodiment of human will against the relentless forces of nature and chaos. Every brick was placed with purpose, every tower built with care, creating a fortress that was as much spiritual as physical. The men who guarded it carried this legacy silently, their lives entwined with the wall's own timeless endurance. As afternoon faded toward evening, the sky shifted to softer tones of amber and rose. Shadows lengthened, creeping slowly over the ramparts, enveloping the wall in a gentle twilight. The air cooled, bringing a renewed sharpness to the senses, and the first stars appeared, faint points of light trembling in the vast dome overhead. The sentries prepared once more for the coming night, donning cloaks and tightening scarves against the chill. The rhythm of their footsteps slowed, paced by the diminishing light and the deepening silence. Fires were rekindled, casting warm glows that flickered against the rough stone and the weary faces of the watchers. Night here was different from any other place. It was heavier, more profound. A vast curtain that pressed close, alive with shadows and secrets. The Great Wall seemed to hold its breath beneath the stars, standing sentinel against the dark wilderness that whispered beyond. And through it all, the sentries remained, silent, steady, unwavering. They were the living heartbeat of this ancient monument, the eternal guardians of a fragile peace, bound by duty and time. Their watch would continue, unbroken, as endless as the stones beneath their feet, and as enduring as the night itself. Night deepened slowly, folding the landscape into a shroud of quiet shadows. The moon, a pale guardian in the vast sky, cast a gentle silver light over the Great Wall, turning its rugged stones into a tapestry of light and dark. The air was crisp and still, carrying the faint scent of pine needles and cold earth, a silent breath shared between the land and those who stood watch upon it. The sentries moved with practiced grace through the ancient battlements, their footsteps soft on the weathered stone. Their cloaks billowed lightly in the chill breeze, whispering secrets as they passed. Faces were set in calm determination, eyes sharp and alert despite the weariness that tugged at their muscles. Each man was a solitary figure in a vast expanse, yet bound to the others by an invisible thread of shared purpose. Within the watchtowers, faint lantern light flickered, casting dancing shadows that played across rough wooden beams and chipped stone walls. The quiet crackle of a small fire mingled with the distant hoot of an owl, punctuating the night's deep stillness. These sounds wove a fragile tapestry of life against the overwhelming silence, a reminder that even here, at the edge of empire, the pulse of existence continued. Beyond the wall, the wilderness stirred in muted ways. Leaves rustled softly under unseen footsteps, and the low howl of a distant wolf echoed faintly through the trees. These nocturnal whispers were familiar to the sentries, woven into the fabric of their watch. The land held stories untold, its ancient heart beating beneath layers of shadow and time. The sentries paused at intervals, scanning the horizon with steady eyes. Their breath came in quiet clouds, dissipating into the cold air. Hands rested on spears, fingers tracing the worn wood and sharpened points, feeling the reassuring weight of their weapons. The rhythm of their patrol was deliberate and slow, each movement measured, each moment held with mindful presence. In these long hours, the mind drifted to distant memories and distant places. Homes left behind, faces glimpsed in fleeting dreams, the warmth of a fire on a cold night. Yet the sentries returned always to the present, anchored by the wall and their unyielding duty. Their vigilance was a silent prayer, a steady flame burning against the dark. The night stretched on, timeless and vast. Stars wheeled overhead in slow procession, their cold light illuminating the stones and the watchers alike. The Great Wall stood eternal, a silent guardian etched into the earth, holding fast against the creeping wilderness. As the hours waned toward dawn, the chill deepened, and the first faint hues of morning teased the horizon. The sentries remained steadfast, their figures etched against the growing light, a testament to endurance and the quiet strength of those who stand watch through the longest nights. The first whispers of dawn brushed the horizon with delicate strokes of pale pink and soft gold, stirring the world gently from its nocturnal slumber. The cool air softened, and the chill that had gripped the night began to ease, replaced by the faint warmth of the approaching sun. The Great Wall, long cloaked in shadow, caught the subtle light and shimmered faintly, its time-worn stones telling silent tales of countless dawns watched and guarded. The sentries moved with measured grace along the ramparts, their breath steady, their eyes ever watchful despite the slow easing of the night's vigil. The rhythmic tapping of worn boots on stone echoed softly, blending with the distant chorus of awakening birds. The wind carried the scent of damp earth and pine, mingled with the faint aroma of smoke rising from the villages far below. Each step along the wall was deliberate, the men's movements in harmony with the slow unfolding of day. The leather of their armor creaked softly, worn smooth by years of labor and watchfulness. Fingers brushed over the shafts of spears, finding comfort in their familiar weight, steadying the mind as the world shifted from darkness into light. Around them, the land awakened in quiet moments, the rustling of leaves as small creatures ventured forth, the gentle ripple of streams winding through distant valleys, the soft murmur of wind weaving through pines. The vast wilderness beyond the wall lay bathed in the early light, a patchwork of shadows and gold, still holding secrets in its folds. The watchtowers, silhouetted against the rising sun, stood as steadfast sentinels, their wooden beams warmed by the day's first rays. Within, the sentries tended to their duties with calm diligence, kindling fires to warm chilled limbs, tending to the maintenance of weapons and gear, and sharing brief, unspoken acknowledgments that reinforced the quiet camaraderie forged through shared hardship. The borderland was a place of paradox, a realm where civilization met the wild, where the steady pulse of human order beat against the unpredictable rhythms of nature. The Great Wall was not merely a structure of stone but a living boundary, its presence felt in the very air and earth, shaping the lives of all who dwelled near it. As the sun rose higher, the shadows retreated fully, revealing the full breadth of the landscape, the endless stretch of forests, hills, and distant villages. The sentry's eyes scanned this vast panorama, vigilant to every detail, every subtle movement. The peace of morning was fragile, held in balance by their watchful presence. In these moments of quiet light, the men found a measure of solace. The long night's burdens began to lift, replaced by the steady rhythms of day. Yet the weight of their duty remained, an ever-present tether to the wall and the fragile peace it guarded. As the day unfolded, the Great Wall continued its eternal vigil, a silent witness to the passage of time, the endurance of those who stand upon it, and the delicate balance between worlds. Night approached once more, bringing with it a profound stillness that settled like a gentle shroud over the vast expanse surrounding the Great Wall. The fading hues of twilight gave way to the deep indigo of the sky, studded with countless stars that shimmered cold and distant. The moon rose slowly, casting a pale, silvery light that painted the ancient stones and towering watchtowers with ethereal grace. Shadows stretched and shifted, folding the landscape into a realm of quiet mystery. The air had grown crisp and cool, carrying the faint, earthy scent of pine and damp soil. It was a breath drawn from the very heart of the wilderness beyond the wall, mingling with the subtle smoke rising from distant village hearths. The sentries, wrapped in heavy cloaks worn thin by seasons of duty, moved with deliberate steps along the battlements. Their faces, weathered and resolute, bore the marks of long nights spent in unwavering vigilance. Within the watchtowers, the flicker of lantern light cast dancing shadows upon rough timber beams and uneven stone walls. The faint crackle of embers in small fires was the only sound aside from the whispered rustle of night winds weaving through the pines. Each sentry stood a solitary figure against the vastness, a silent guardian watching over the fragile boundary between empire and wild. Their eyes swept the horizon continuously, alert to every subtle change. The faintest movement of leaves, a distant shape slipping through shadow, the softest echo carried on the breeze. These men had learned to read the language of the night, where silence spoke volumes and darkness concealed both threat and secret. Their hands rested lightly on weapons long kept sharp and ready, fingers tracing familiar grooves worn smooth by countless hours of watchfulness. The wilderness beyond was alive with hidden life. The soft rustle of small creatures moving through underbrush, the distant call of nocturnal birds, and the occasional mournful howl of wolves filled the night with a subdued symphony. These sounds were a reminder of the untamed world pressing against the wall, a realm governed by ancient rhythms and the eternal dance of predator and prey. Amid the stillness, the sentries found a measure of quiet strength. Their thoughts often drifted to faraway homes, to faces remembered and dreams deferred. Yet they returned always to the present, the cold stone beneath their feet, the weight of armor upon their shoulders, the steady beat of duty calling them to watch and wait. Time here stretched and folded, measured not by clocks but by the slow turning of the earth and the endless vigil of the wall. Each moment was both fleeting and eternal, a fragile thread in the vast tapestry of history woven through stone and shadow. As the hours waned toward dawn, the stars slowly faded, and the first hints of light crept once again across the horizon. The sentries remained steadfast, their silhouettes etched against the pale glow, unwavering in their silent watch. The great wall held firm, a timeless guardian standing between worlds, its enduring strength carried forward by those who bore its endless burden. The first pale fingers of dawn stretched slowly across the eastern sky, softening the deep indigo cloak of night that had wrapped the land in silence. A faint pink glow blossomed on the horizon, promising the return of light and warmth. The great wall, etched against the subtle canvas, stood resolute and silent, a stone serpent winding through hills and forests, a boundary carved from time itself. The sentries moved with quiet precision along the battlements, their footsteps muffled by the worn stones beneath their feet. The chill of early morning lingered in the air, mingling with the faint, earthy aroma of moss and damp wood. The heavy breath of the watchers rose in gentle clouds, dissipating quickly into the cool air. Faces, marked by fatigue and determination, were turned toward the slow, awakening world beyond the wall. Birdsong began to weave through the trees, delicate and tentative, breaking the long-held stillness of the night. The forest stirred softly, leaves rustled as small creatures stirred beneath the undergrowth, and the distant flow of a hidden stream added its gentle murmur to the morning chorus. The vast wilderness beyond the wall seemed to breathe anew, alive with the rhythms of the coming day. Within the towers, sentries tended to their tasks with steady hands. Weapons were cleaned and sharpened, armor adjusted to fit snugly against tired limbs. Fires were rekindled, sending thin spirals of smoke upward, a quiet signal of life and vigilance. These rituals, repeated countless times, grounded the watchers in a sense of purpose amid the vast, unpredictable frontier. The great wall itself seemed to glow faintly in the dawn, its stones warmed by the gentle touch of sunlight. Moss and lichen clung stubbornly to cracks and crevices, softening the harsh lines carved by human hands. The scent of aged stone mingled with the fresh breath of morning, a sensory tapestry woven from centuries of weather and watchfulness. The horizon revealed a tapestry of rolling hills and dense forests, dotted here and there with the simple roofs of distant villages. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, blending with the mist that still clung to the low valleys. Life beyond the wall was a quiet hum, a fragile thread of humanity stretching across the wild landscape. The sentry's eyes scanned this expanse with unwavering focus. Every shift of shadow, every distant movement, was noted and weighed. The wilderness beyond was vast and indifferent, home to both silent beauty and lurking danger. Their vigilance was a thin line of defense, a steadfast shield against the unknown. As the sun rose higher, the chill of dawn yielded to the warmth of day. Light spilled over the stones, casting sharp shadows and illuminating the textures of the wall's weathered surface. The rhythm of patrol resumed, measured and deliberate, each step a beat in the slow song of endurance. The bond between the sentries was unspoken but strong, forged in the crucible of solitude and shared responsibility. Together, they carried the legacy of the Great Wall, a living monument to human will, resilience, and the fragile peace held at the edge of empire. As the day stretched on, the wall and its guardians remained a constant presence, watching and waiting. The land beyond whispered its secrets in the wind, and the watchers stood firm, silent and steady, sentinels of a world poised between shadow and light. The afternoon sun cast a mellow glow across the great wall, softening the edges of the rugged stones and bathing the surrounding landscape in a warm, golden light. The air was still and heavy with the scent of pine needles and sun-baked earth, the faint smoke from distant village fires curling upward in delicate spirals. The world beyond the wall lay stretched out like an ancient tapestry, woven from hills, forests, and scattered settlements, each thread telling a story of endurance and quiet survival. Along the battlements, the sentries moved with slow, purposeful steps. Their leather armor bore the faded hues of countless seasons, worn and weathered but steadfast as ever. The grip of their hands on spears and bows was firm yet practiced, each movement a silent echo of discipline and vigilance. Their faces, etched with the lines of long nights and endless duty, were calm and resolute, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of change. The rhythm of their patrol was unhurried, measured by the gentle shift of light and shadow rather than urgency. The distant call of birds mingled with the soft rustle of leaves, creating a subtle symphony that underscored the stillness of the moment. The sentries were attuned to every whisper carried on the breeze, the crack of a twig, the faintest stir of movement in the underbrush, each sound a possible herald of danger or disturbance. Within the watchtowers, the sentries took brief moments to tend to their weapons and armor. The scrape of stone against metal, the careful threading of leather straps, and the soft exhalations of breath punctuated the quiet. Fires were kept alive with steady care, their flickering flames casting warm glows against the rough-hewn walls and the determined faces of those who guarded the frontier. Beyond the wall, the dense forest stretched endlessly, their canopies a rich mosaic of green and shadow. Streams wound silently through the valleys, their waters cool and clear, reflecting the dappling sunlight. The wildness pressed close, a living, breathing presence that shaped the lives of all who dwelled near. The sentries knew well the stories whispered among the trees, of ancient spirits, forgotten tribes, and the ever-present balance between man and nature. Despite the weight of their watch, moments of quiet grace punctuated the day. A hawk might circle high above, its sharp cries cutting through the stillness. A gentle breeze could stir the branches, sending cascades of leaves fluttering like silent wings. These fleeting touches of beauty served as reminders of the delicate harmony that persisted at the empire's edge. The sentry's vigilance was a steady flame, burning quietly against the encroaching unknown. Their watch was a testament to human resilience, a slow and unyielding heartbeat that echoed through the ages. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the wall, the air cooled and the landscape settled into the soft embrace of evening. The Great Wall, ancient and eternal, stood as both protector and symbol. It was a line drawn in stone, a boundary between worlds, and a silent witness to the passage of time and the lives intertwined with its shadow. The sentries, guardians of this fragile frontier, remained steadfast, silent figures etched against the fading light, their duty unbroken and their resolve unwavering. Evening descended with a slow, deliberate grace, softening the sharp contours of the Great Wall and casting the sprawling landscape into hues of deep indigo and muted gold. The sun dipped beneath the horizon, leaving behind a faint glow that lingered like a whisper, a fragile promise of night's arrival. The air cooled, carrying the rich, earthy scent of pine and damp soil, mingled with the distant smoke of hearth fires from villages nestled below. The sentries continued their vigilant patrol along the ancient stones, their footsteps steady and unhurried. Cloaked in worn fabric and weathered leather, they moved with the quiet confidence of men intimately familiar with their domain. Their faces were shadowed but resolute, eyes sharp beneath heavy brows, ever watchful for the faintest stir of movement beyond the wall. Lanterns were lit within the watchtowers, their warm glow flickering softly against the rough timber and stone. The small flames cast dancing shadows, illuminating faces etched with quiet determination. The crackling of fires mingled with the distant calls of night birds and the gentle rustling of leaves, forming a delicate nocturnal symphony that wrapped the wall in a calm yet watchful embrace. The wilderness beyond remained a restless presence, alive with the secret rhythms of the dark. The murmur of wind through the pines, the soft patter of unseen creatures moving through underbrush, and the haunting howl of a distant wolf created an ever-present backdrop to the sentry's vigil. These sounds, both familiar and foreboding, wove through the night like whispered warnings. The men's hands rested lightly on their weapons, spears, bows, and swords forged for the relentless defense of the Empire. Their fingers traced the worn grips and shafts, seeking comfort in the steady weight and familiar textures. Eyes scanned the shadows continuously, keen to detect any hint of danger lurking just beyond sight. Though the night was long and the hours heavy with solitude, the sentries found moments of quiet strength in their shared duty. Their thoughts often wandered to homes far away, to faces remembered and promises kept silent. Yet they returned always to the present, the cold stone beneath their feet, the weight of armor on their shoulders, and the unwavering resolve to stand guard. Time here was measured not by the passage of hours, but by the slow turning of the earth and the eternal rhythm of watchfulness. Each breath, each step, was a testament to endurance and commitment, a silent pledge to hold the fragile peace at the Empire's edge. As midnight deepened, the stars wheeled slowly overhead, casting their cold light upon the wall and its guardians. The moon, high and pale, bathed the landscape in a silver glow, softening shadows and revealing the stark beauty of the rugged terrain. The great wall stood eternal, a living monument etched into the earth, its stones bearing the weight of countless generations. The sentries remained steadfast, shadows among shadows, carrying forward the unbroken line of watchfulness through the silent depths of night. The night deepened, folding the world into a stillness that seemed almost sacred. The great wall lay beneath a vast expanse of stars, its rugged stones glowing faintly in the moonlight. The air was crisp and cool, filled with the faint scent of pine and earth, carried on a gentle breeze that whispered through the ancient forest bordering the wall. This nocturnal breath wove a delicate pattern of sound and silence, a subtle symphony of the wild that stretched beyond human grasp. The sentries moved slowly along the battlements, their cloaks fluttering softly in the night wind. Their footsteps were deliberate but light, practiced over years of endless patrols along the weathered stone. The faces of these guardians were set in quiet resolve, eyes sharp and unwavering despite the long hours spent under the vast sky. Each man carried the weight of duty in his steady posture, a living link in the unbroken chain of watchfulness. Within the towers, the glow of lanterns flickered gently, casting wavering shadows against rough beams and chipped stone walls. The crackle of small fires mingled with the distant calls of owls and the rustle of nocturnal creatures moving through the underbrush. The sentries listened, attuned to every sound. A snapped twig, a distant rustle, a sudden silence that might signal a disturbance or threat. The wilderness beyond the wall was a realm of secrets and stories. The dense forest hid the passage of unseen footsteps, the movements of creatures both natural and mysterious. The night held ancient rhythms, whispered legends carried on the wind, and the persistent tension between man and the untamed world. The sentries knew these rhythms well, their senses honed to detect the slightest anomaly in the familiar chorus of the wild. The cold bit into their skin, a sharp reminder of the season's advance, yet the men remained steadfast. Their breaths rose in pale clouds, drifting upward into the quiet night. Their hands rested lightly on the shafts of spears and the grips of swords, finding strength in the familiar textures. Eyes scanned the horizon continuously, tracing the outline of distant hills, the darkened silhouettes of trees, and the faint glimmers of lanterns from far-flung settlements. Amid the solitude, the sentries found brief solace in the constancy of the stars. These distant lights traced timeless paths overhead, guiding and guarding in their silent watch. The great wall beneath them was a counterpart, a monument of human will and perseverance, reaching across the land to hold back the encroaching wilderness. Time here stretched and folded, measured in slow rhythms rather than hurried moments. The centuries lived in this eternal present, where each heartbeat and breath was a quiet act of endurance. The wall and its watchers formed a single entity, stone and flesh intertwined in a solemn covenant. As the night waned toward dawn, the cold air deepened, sharpening the senses and heightening the quiet anticipation of daybreak. The stars dimmed slowly, giving way to the first pale hues on the horizon. The sentries stood firm, their silhouettes etched against the faint glow, guardians of a fragile boundary between worlds. The Great Wall remained, eternal and unyielding, its legacy carried forward by those who stood watch through the deepest hours of night. In their silent vigil, the sentries were both protectors and witnesses, a steadfast presence in a land where shadow and light danced endlessly in the passage of time. The horizon blushed faintly with the promise of dawn, a subtle gradient of soft lavender melting into the pale gold of early morning light. The night's shadows reluctantly receded, drawn back by the gentle insistence of the sun's first rays. The vast expanse surrounding the Great Wall began to reveal itself anew. Folded hills, dense forests, and scattered settlements slowly emerging from the cloak of darkness. The sentries moved with quiet resolve along the ancient ramparts, their steps steady and measured as they resumed their watch in the soft light. The chill of night still lingered in the air, mingling with the fresh scent of dew-laden pine and damp earth. Their breath formed fleeting clouds in the cool morning, dissolving swiftly into the stillness. The worn leather of their armor creaked softly as they adjusted their gear, the familiarity of these motions grounding them in a world poised between night and day. Each man's face bore the quiet marks of fatigue and determination. Their eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the vast horizon with unwavering focus. The Great Wall beneath their feet was a steady companion, its stones weathered by centuries but firm and resolute. The ramparts stretched endlessly in both directions, a serpent of stone weaving through the landscape, a testament to the endurance and will of those who built and guarded it. Birdsong threaded through the air, a delicate counterpoint to the rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. The wilderness beyond the wall seemed to awaken slowly, its many voices blending into a soft morning chorus. Streams glittered in the growing light, weaving silver threads through the green tapestry of forest and field. Smoke rose faintly from distant chimneys, marking the slow stirrings of village life. The sentries' patrol was deliberate and unhurried, their senses finely tuned to the subtle rhythms of the land. Each sound and movement was noted, the faint shift of a branch, the distant murmur of voices carried on the breeze, the flutter of wings as birds took flight. These details formed an invisible map of the world beyond, guiding their watchful vigilance. In brief pauses, the men tended to their weapons and gear, the practiced motions quiet and methodical. The scrape of stone against metal, the tightening of leather straps, and the soft murmur of breath blended seamlessly with the natural symphony. Fires were stoked in the watchtowers, sending thin wisps of smoke spiraling upward, a fragile thread connecting the men to the earth and sky. The Great Wall stood as both shield and symbol, a boundary drawn not only in stone but in resolve and shared history. It marked the line between empire and wilderness, order and the unknown. The The sentries embodied this boundary, their lives intertwined with the slow passage of time and the enduring strength of the wall. As morning deepened into day, the sun's light grew warmer, casting long shadows and illuminating the textures of stone and wood. The air filled with the scents of pine, earth, and smoke, a fragrant reminder of the delicate balance sustained here. The vast landscape stretched endlessly, a mosaic of life and memory woven through hills, forests, and villages. The sentries continued their watch, steady and unbroken, a quiet presence in a world forever poised between light and shadow. Their vigilance was a slow, enduring pulse, an unyielding heartbeat echoing through the ages, a testament to the silent strength of those who stand guard at the edge of time. The afternoon light settled softly over the Great Wall, bathing the rugged stones in a warm, honeyed glow. The air was still and heavy with the scent of sun-warmed pine and dry earth, mingling faintly with the distant smoke drifting from village chimneys. The vast landscape stretched outward, a patchwork of rolling hills, dense forests, and scattered fields, a timeless mosaic beneath an endless sky. The sentries moved with steady purpose along the battlements, their footsteps quiet but deliberate on the worn stone. The leather of their armor was softened by years of use, patched and faded but sturdy. Their hands rested lightly on weapons long trusted, spears with polished shafts, bows carved with care, and swords sharpened to a fine edge. Each man's face was marked by the passage of countless watches, eyes steady and alert beneath brows heavy with the weight of duty. Between patrols, the sentries took moments to tend to their gear, cleaning blades and adjusting straps with practiced hands. Fires in the watchtowers flickered gently, sending warm light dancing across rough timber beams and stone walls. The soft murmur of conversation was rare but measured, brief exchanges of essential news or quiet words of encouragement, carried out in tones low enough not to disturb the pervasive calm. Beyond the wall, the wilderness breathed with slow, ancient rhythms. The rustling of leaves, the distant call of birds, and the occasional whisper of the wind through the pines formed a natural symphony. Streams wound silently through hidden valleys, their waters cool and clear, reflecting the dappling sunlight. This world, vast and untamed, pressed close to the empire's edge, a reminder of both beauty and danger. The sentries were ever watchful, their senses attuned to the smallest shifts in this delicate balance. Every sound was noted, a twig snapping, a distant footfall, the subtle change in the wind. Their vigilance was a quiet force, steady as the stones beneath their feet, holding firm against the encroaching unknown. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows that stretched across the wall and into the forests beyond, the air cooled slightly. The scent of pine grew sharper, mingling with the fading warmth of the day. The sentries paused briefly to take in the view. The endless stretch of land bathed in golden light, a world both fragile and enduring. The Great Wall stood eternal, a monument carved from stone and will, a boundary between worlds and a testament to human perseverance. The men who guarded it were its living heart, their steady presence a line drawn in time, holding back the wilderness with quiet strength. As evening deepened, the watch continued, unbroken and unwavering. The stones held their secrets and their stories, and the sentries bore their burden with silent grace, guardians of a peace forged in stone and shadow. As twilight descended, the sky deepened into a canvas of muted purples and soft blues, the last light of day retreating slowly beneath the horizon. The Great Wall, silhouetted against this gentle dusk, appeared as a dark spine stretching endlessly across the rolling landscape. The air cooled perceptibly, carrying with it the fragrant mingling of pine resin and moist earth, scents that spoke of both the wild and the enduring presence of man. The sentries resumed their solemn patrol along the battlements, their movements deliberate and unhurried. Cloaked in heavy garments, their forms were shadowed figures against the fading light, steadfast as the wall they guarded. Their eyes, accustomed now to the dimming world, scanned the horizon with unwavering focus, ever alert to the faintest sign of movement or disturbance. Lanterns were lit in the watchtowers, their flickering flames casting warm halos against the rough timber and stone. The glow revealed faces lined with quiet resolve and the fatigue of many nights spent in vigilance. The crackling of small fires mingled with the natural chorus of night, soft rustling leaves, distant calls of nocturnal birds, and the whispering wind weaving through the ancient forest. The wilderness beyond the wall held its secrets tightly in the shroud of darkness. Creatures moved unseen, their presence known only through subtle sounds. A branch bending gently, a soft footfall on the forest floor, the occasional distant howl. The sentries were attuned to this hidden world, their senses sharpened by countless nights spent reading the language of shadow and silence. Their hands rested lightly on weapons worn smooth by years of use. The familiar weight of spear and sword offered a quiet comfort against the unknown. Eyes traced the outlines of distant hills and darkened trees, ever watchful for signs of encroaching threat or disturbance. Despite the solitude and the long hours, the sentries found strength in their shared duty. Thoughts of distant homes and loved ones often flitted through their minds, fleeting memories carried on the cool night air. Yet their focus remained anchored to the present. The cold stone beneath their feet, the steady rhythm of their breath, and the unyielding vigil demanded by the wall. Time here was a slow, deliberate thing, measured by the turning of the stars and the passage of the moon. Each moment stretched into the next, a continuous thread of watchfulness woven through the fabric of night. As midnight deepened, the moon rose higher, its pale light washing over the ancient stones and the silent sentries. The great wall stood immutable, a sentinel carved from earth and stone. Its strength echoed in the quiet determination of those who guarded it through the darkest hours. The night held its breath, poised between shadow and light, and the sentries stood firm, silent guardians in an eternal watch. The slow passage of night carried on, unbroken and serene. The sky was a deep velvet, scattered with countless stars whose cold light shimmered faintly upon the vast stretches of the Great Wall. The air was crisp, filled with the earthy scent of pine and the faint musk of damp stone. A gentle breeze stirred the foliage along the wall's edge, carrying with it whispers of distant forests and unseen life. The sentries maintained their steady patrol, each footfall a quiet echo on the ancient stones. Their breath rose in soft clouds, quickly vanishing into the chill night air. Cloaked figures moved with practiced ease, their eyes sharp and searching, ever watchful beneath the canopy of stars. These men were the silent pulse of the frontier, bound by duty and resilience. Within the watchtowers, the warm glow of lanterns flickered softly, illuminating faces marked by endurance and quiet strength. The occasional crackle of firewood punctuated the stillness, while the distant calls of nocturnal creatures wove through the night air. Owls hooted faintly, and the rustle of small animals in the underbrush created a subtle symphony of the wild. The wilderness beyond was a realm of shadows and mystery, alive with movement unseen but keenly felt. The sentries listened closely for the faintest anomaly. A broken twig, a shifting shadow, a sudden silence that might signal intrusion or danger. Their senses were finely tuned to the natural rhythms, an intimate knowledge born of long vigil and careful observation. The weight of the night settled upon the wall, a heavy but familiar presence. Time seemed to slow, each moment stretching into the next with deliberate calm. The sentries found solace in the constancy of their watch, the slow, rhythmic pulse of duty grounding them against the vast unknown. Their hands rested lightly on the grips of weapons forged for defense and survival. The familiar textures of wood and metal provided a quiet reassurance. Eyes traced the jagged silhouettes of distant hills and the dark expanse of the forest, alert to every flicker and movement. As the hours passed, the stars wheeled slowly overhead, their cold light bathing the landscape in an ethereal glow. The moon hung low, a pale guardian watching over the ancient wall and those who kept its silent vigil. The great wall stood eternal and unyielding, a testament to human resolve and the fragile balance between civilization and wilderness. The sentries remained steadfast, shadows among shadows, holding the line through the longest night. The early hours of the morning stretched out beneath a sky painted with fading stars, as the pale glow of the approaching dawn began its slow, inevitable advance. The world around the Great Wall lay wrapped in a hushed stillness, the kind born of night's deep embrace, where time seemed to stretch and fold upon itself, fragile and eternal all at once. The chill of night clung softly to the stones and the air, a gentle reminder of the cycle turning steadily onward. The sentries moved with unwavering care along the ancient battlements, their steps a soft murmur against the weathered stone. Cloaked against the lingering cold, their figures were steady and composed, the long hours of vigil etched into their slow, deliberate movements. Their faces were shadowed, eyes glimmering faintly in the dim light, sharp and searching as they scanned the horizon, ever watchful for the faintest stirrings of life or threat. Within the watchtowers, lanterns flickered with a gentle glow, casting wavering shadows upon rough-hewn beams and ancient walls. Fires, tended with quiet hands, sputtered softly, the warm light a small island of comfort in the vast darkness. The crackle of flames mixed with the distant chorus of nocturnal birds settling into rest, and the occasional whisper of a breeze threading through the pine branches. The wilderness beyond the wall was alive with subtle movements, shadows shifting beneath the canopy, the delicate rustle of leaves stirred by unseen creatures. The sentries listened closely, attuned to the intricate symphony of the night, the soft padding of paws, the sudden hush of the wind, the distant call of a lone wolf echoing through the valleys. These sounds were both a balm and a warning, a constant reminder of the fragile boundary held by stone and flesh. The cold seeped into the bones, yet the men remained steadfast, their breath rising in pale clouds that dissolved quickly into the air. Their hands, steady and sure, gripped weapons worn smooth by years of use. The familiar weight and texture offered a quiet strength against the uncertainty of the night. Their eyes traced the contours of distant hills and dense forests, silhouettes etched faintly against the dim horizon. Time here was unhurried, measured not by clocks but by the slow turning of the earth and the slow unfolding of light and shadow. Each heartbeat, each breath, was a quiet testament to endurance and purpose, a thread woven into the enduring fabric of the wall. As the first hints of dawn tinged the eastern sky with pale rose and gold, the vast expanse of land began to soften, the darkness retreating gently before the coming light. The wall stood silent and resolute, its stones glowing faintly in the morning haze. The sentries paused briefly to absorb the stillness, a moment suspended between night and day, shadow and light. Around them, the natural world stirred in response to the shifting day. Birds lifted from hidden perches with delicate calls. The breeze carried the scent of pine and fresh earth, and the distant murmur of awakening villages wove softly through the air. The great wilderness beyond the wall was vast and timeless, its rhythms ancient and unyielding. Yet within this vastness, the wall stood as a living boundary, an enduring line drawn by human hands and will. It was both shield and symbol, a testament to resilience, vigilance, and the quiet strength of those who held the frontier. The sentries embodied this strength, their steady presence a heartbeat in the long, slow story of the empire's edge. As the sun climbed higher, spilling warm light over the landscape, the watch continued with unwavering resolve. The wall and its guardians remained, steadfast and silent, poised between worlds. Their vigil was an endless thread, woven through time, binding past and future with the quiet power of endurance. The day unfolded slowly, the light deepening and spreading, the sounds of life growing more distinct and vibrant. Yet beneath it all, the watch continued, steady, unyielding, a quiet promise carried forward in stone and shadow. The sun slowly dipped toward the horizon, casting long, gentle shadows across the weathered stones of the Great Wall. The warm light painted the landscape in hues of amber and soft crimson, as if the world itself was preparing to rest. The air was thick with the scent of pine needles and dry earth, mixed faintly with the smoke rising from village hearths far below. A serene stillness wrapped the land, broken only by the steady steps of the sentries as they resumed their patrol. The men moved with quiet purpose, their cloaks rustling softly against the stone battlements. faces, weathered by seasons of endless watch, held the calm resolve of those who had long accepted the burden of guarding this ancient boundary. Their eyes swept the horizon, sharp and searching, yet tempered with a quiet patience that spoke of countless nights spent in vigil. Within the watchtowers, lanterns were lit, their flickering flames casting warm pools of light that danced across rough timber and chipped stone. The glow softened the hard edges of the walls and illuminated the faces of the sentries, their expressions calm but alert. The crackling of fires mingled with the distant calls of birds settling in for the night, weaving a soft nocturnal symphony. The wilderness beyond the wall pressed close, a dark sea of trees and hills stretching beyond sight. The night was alive with subtle sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of a lone wolf, the whisper of the wind threading through the pines. These were the ancient voices of the land, a reminder of the ever-present tension between civilization and the untamed. Hands rested lightly on weapons polished by years of use, spears with smooth shafts, swords keen and ready. The familiar weight grounded the sentries in their purpose, a silent assurance amid the vast uncertainty. Their eyes traced every shadow, every flicker of movement, each a potential sign of change or threat. Though fatigue tugged at their limbs and the long hours weighed heavy, the sentries remained steadfast. Their thoughts often drifted to distant homes, to faces remembered, to lives lived beyond this endless frontier. Yet they returned always to the present, the cold stone beneath their feet, the rhythmic breath in their lungs, and the unbroken duty that bound them to the wall. As stars began to pierce the darkening sky, the Great Wall stood eternal, a silent guardian between worlds. The sentries, shadows among shadows, carried the legacy forward, watchful, patient, and unyielding. The night deepened slowly, enfolding the world in a quiet cloak of shadow and stillness. The stars shimmered faintly above, distant and cold, their pale light barely touching the vast expanse of forest and stone that stretched beyond the Great Wall. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, a subtle reminder of the wilderness's enduring presence. The sentries continued their steady patrol, footsteps soft and deliberate on the ancient stones. Their cloaks fluttered gently in the night breeze, and their eyes, accustomed now to the darkness, moved with sharp vigilance. Each man carried the weight of countless nights spent in watchfulness, their senses finely tuned to the slightest anomaly in the familiar sounds of the wild. Within the towers, the flickering lanterns cast warm pools of light against rough timber beams and stone walls. Fires crackled softly, their glow lending a fragile comfort against the vast, indifferent night. The sentries' faces were calm and focused, marked by fatigue but strengthened by resolve. The wilderness beyond remained alive and watchful. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the soft footfall of unseen creatures wove a delicate symphony of the night. These sounds, both ancient and ever-changing, framed the sentries' vigil, a reminder of the border they upheld between the empire and the wild unknown. Their hands rested lightly on the familiar weapons, spears and swords worn smooth by use. The steady rhythm of their patrol was a slow and enduring heartbeat, a quiet testament to human resilience and steadfastness. As the hours passed, the moon rose higher, casting a silver glow that softened shadows and illuminated the rugged landscape. The Great Wall stood as it had for centuries, an unwavering line of defense, silent yet alive with history and purpose. Though the night was long and the watch unending, the sentries found strength in their shared duty. Their presence was a constant thread woven into the fabric of time, a quiet promise of protection and endurance at the edge of the world. The first faint light of dawn began to soften the edges of night, painting the horizon with gentle shades of pink and pale gold. The vast expanse surrounding the Great Wall stirred quietly, as if awakening from a deep and restful sleep. The air was cool and crisp, filled with the delicate scent of dew-kissed pine and freshly turned earth, a fresh breath carried on the morning breeze. The sentries moved steadily along the battlements, their steps measured and calm beneath the softening sky. The shadows clinging to their cloaks gradually receded, revealing faces lined with quiet determination and eyes still sharp from the long vigil. Their breath formed small clouds in the cool air, dissolving swiftly as they pressed on, ever watchful. Lanterns were extinguished one by one, their warm glows fading like embers at the coming of day. Fires in the watchtowers flickered and died, replaced by the gentle light of the rising sun. The sounds of the waking world began to filter in, the distant calls of birds, the soft murmur of village life stirring below, the rustling of leaves as small creatures ventured into the open. Beyond the wall, the wilderness stretched vast and unchanged, a living tapestry of greens and browns woven through hills and valleys. Streams glittered in the morning light, tracing silver paths through the forest. The scent of pine mingled with the earthiness of moss and fallen leaves, carrying the quiet promise of a new day. The sentry's hands rested lightly on weapons worn smooth by years of use. Spears carved with care, swords tempered by countless battles, bows strung with taut sinew. These tools were not merely instruments of war, but symbols of a sacred duty, a covenant between those who guarded the empire and the land itself. Their eyes scanned the horizon with practiced vigilance, seeking any sign of change in the familiar landscape. Each detail mattered: the slight movement of a branch, the distant flicker of smoke, the unusual call of a bird. These subtle hints formed the language of watchfulness, spoken and understood without words. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light over the stones and forests, the sentries remained steadfast. Their watch was a slow and steady pulse, a quiet rhythm that bound them to the past and future alike. The great wall stood eternal, its stones etched with history and hope, a silent witness to the endless passage of time. The day unfolded gently, the world bathed in soft light and the promise of peace. Yet beneath the calm surface, the sentries held their vigil, guardians of a fragile boundary, standing watch at the edge of the unknown. The pale light of dawn crept steadily over the horizon, casting a soft glow across the ancient stones of the Great Wall. The landscape, once shrouded in night's deep veil, began to reveal its intricate tapestry of hills, forests, and distant villages. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, a quiet renewal that whispered of a new day's promise. The sentries moved along the battlements with measured steps, their breath steady in the crisp morning air. Their worn cloaks fluttered gently as they passed, and their eyes, sharp and focused, traced the waking world below. Faces marked by countless watches bore a calm endurance, the quiet strength of those who had long made the wall their life's purpose. Within the watchtowers, lanterns were extinguished as the growing light dispelled their need. Fires dwindled to embers, sending up thin spirals of smoke that mingled with the morning mist. The sounds of waking life began to rise, the distant murmur of villagers stirring, the soft calls of birds greeting the day, and the gentle rustling of leaves stirred by a waking breeze. Beyond the wall, the wilderness breathed in the soft light, its shadows retreating beneath the sun's gentle touch. Streams glittered like silver ribbons threading through the valleys, and the dense forests hummed with the slow stirrings of creatures emerging from their nocturnal rest. The great expanse of land held a timeless stillness, a world poised between the enduring strength of stone and the ever-changing rhythms of nature. The sentries paused briefly at vantage points, eyes sweeping across the horizon. Their weapons rested lightly in their hands, spears, swords, and bows, silent companions in their ceaseless watch. Each man carried the weight of history in his steady gaze, a living link in the chain that stretched across centuries. As the sun climbed higher, the day unfolded with deliberate calm. The air warmed, scents deepened, and the landscape came alive with light and color. The great wall stood eternal, its stones warmed by the sun's embrace, a steadfast guardian woven into the fabric of the land. The sentries continued their patrol, their presence a quiet promise, a steadfast line drawn through time, holding firm the fragile boundary between worlds. Their vigil was unending, a slow, enduring rhythm echoing in the vast stillness of the ancient frontier. The morning light grew steadily stronger, bathing the Great Wall in a gentle warmth that chased away the lingering shadows of night. The air was filled with the soft hum of awakening life, the distant calls of birds stirring from their nests, the rustle of leaves as a breeze threaded through the ancient pines, and the faint murmur of village activity beginning below. The landscape stretched vast and timeless, a patchwork of forests, hills, and fields awakening beneath the pale blue sky. The sentries resumed their watch with quiet diligence, their footsteps deliberate upon the stone battlements. Their armor, worn and well-maintained, bore the marks of countless seasons, scuffs, scratches, and faded stains that told stories of endurance and sacrifice. The leather straps creaked softly as they adjusted their gear, hands steady and practiced in their motions. Their faces, calm yet resolute, reflected the slow rhythm of life on the frontier, a rhythm dictated by vigilance and patience. The vast wilderness beyond the wall seemed both distant and immediate, a presence felt through the sounds and scents carried on the breeze. The scent of pine resin mingled with the earthiness of moss and damp stone, grounding the sentries in the tangible world around them. Streams glinted in the sunlight as they wound through hidden valleys, their waters clear and cold. The wilderness was ancient, unyielding, and full of quiet secrets. Throughout the morning, the sentries remained attentive, their eyes tracing the horizon and the dense forests beyond. They noted every subtle change, the shift of a shadow, the flicker of movement among the trees, the distant glimmer of sunlight on water. These small details formed a tapestry of awareness, a silent dialogue between man and nature that had been woven through generations. In brief moments between patrols, the men tended to their weapons and gear, the sounds of metal on stone and leather on leather blending into the natural chorus. Fires in the watchtowers flickered, sending wisps of smoke spiraling upward, a fragile link between earth and sky. Conversations were rare and hushed, words chosen carefully to maintain the quiet peace of the morning. The Great Wall stood as a steadfast guardian, its stones absorbing the light and shadow, the warmth and chill, the countless footsteps of those who had walked its length. It was both barrier and beacon, a symbol of endurance and the fragile balance between civilization and the wild. As midday approached, the sun climbed higher, casting sharper shadows and bathing the world in a bright, clear light. The sentries remained vigilant, their watch unbroken, a slow, steady pulse that resonated through the ages. The land, ancient and vast, held its breath in quiet anticipation, while the wall and its guardians stood firm, silent witnesses to the passage of time. The sun now hung high, pouring warm light across the Great Wall and the sprawling countryside it guarded. The heat softened the hard edges of the stones, casting gentle shadows that shifted slowly with the passing hours. The air was thick with the scent of sun-baked earth, mingled with the faint aroma of pine and the distant fragrance of wildflowers blooming along the hillside. The sentries paced steadily along the battlements, their cloaks pulled back to catch the breeze. Their armor glinted faintly in the sunlight, worn yet sturdy, testament to years of unyielding service. Faces weathered by countless watches bore quiet expressions, eyes sharp beneath furrowed brows, reflecting a deep and enduring vigilance. The rhythmic tapping of footsteps on stone was accompanied by the soft murmurs of nature, the buzzing of insects, the rustle of leaves stirred by the wind, and the occasional call of a bird soaring high above. The wilderness beyond remained a living presence, distant yet always near, a silent challenge to the wall's ancient claim. As the sentries moved, they exchanged no words, their communication subtle and minimal. Their senses were attuned to the smallest changes, the sudden flicker of a shadow, a shift in the scent carried by the breeze, the faintest sound out of place. These nuances shaped their watch, guiding each measured step along the vast ramparts. Between patrols, the men took moments to care for their weapons and themselves, wiping blades clean of dust and adjusting their worn leather straps. The familiar motions brought a quiet comfort, grounding them amid the vast expanse they guarded. The connection to their arms was intimate, each piece a silent companion forged through countless hours of dust. The villages nestled below the wall stirred with life. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the distant sounds of daily chores floated upward. Wood chopping, water drawn from wells, soft conversations. This was the fragile world the centuries protected, a delicate piece carved from the raw edge of wilderness. Time moved with deliberate slowness here. Each heartbeat and breath counted, woven into the endless vigil that spanned generations. The Great Wall stood timeless, a monument to human will and perseverance, its stones steeped in stories untold. As afternoon waned, the light softened, shadows stretching long and cool. The centuries continued their watch with steady purpose, guardians at the boundary between light and shadow, civilization and the unknown. Their silent presence held firm, a quiet testament to endurance amid the ever-turning wheel of time. The afternoon sun began its slow descent, casting a warm, amber hue across the Great Wall and the surrounding landscape. The stones beneath the sentry's feet glowed softly, their surfaces worn smooth by countless years of footfalls and the relentless passage of time. The air, once crisp with the morning chill, now held the faint warmth of the day's lingering heat, mingled with the subtle scent of pine and distant smoke from village hearths. The sentries moved steadily along the ramparts, their forms outlined against the fading light. Their armor, patched and weathered, bore the marks of enduring seasons, scars from past skirmishes, scratches from branches along the wall's edge, and the dull gleam of well-used steel. Faces, etched with lines of resolve and quiet strength, were set in calm concentration. Their eyes scanned the horizon tirelessly, sharp and watchful. The distant forests beyond the wall murmured with the gentle sounds of nature, the rustling of leaves, the soft calls of birds settling in for the evening, and the faint trickle of streams winding through hidden valleys. The wilderness stretched endlessly, vast and unknowable, a constant reminder of the fragile boundary the wall upheld. Occasionally, the sentries paused to rest briefly, leaning against the rough stone or settling into the shelter of watchtowers. Fires burned low, casting flickering light and warmth that pushed back the growing shadows. The crackle of burning wood mingled with the quiet murmurs of low conversation, voices hushed and measured, a brief reprieve amid the unyielding watch. Their hands tended to weapons, wiping blades clean, tightening straps, checking the tautness of bowstrings. These rituals, practiced and precise, were as much a part of the watch as the patrols themselves. The weight of their arms was a constant companion, a reminder of duty and the ever-present readiness required. As the sun slipped lower, the sky blazed with hues of orange and purple, the day's last light shimmering across the vast expanse. Shadows lengthened, reaching across the wall and into the dense forests below. The scent of evening flowers mixed with pine and earth, carried gently on the cooling breeze. The sentries resumed their patrol, their footsteps slower now but no less purposeful. Their minds, while ever vigilant, drifted briefly to the world beyond, the families awaiting their return, the quiet villages nestled safely beyond the frontier, the fragile peace preserved by their tireless watch. The Great Wall stood resilient, a silent guardian etched against the fading light, holding firm at the edge of wilderness and civilization. The sentries, shadows among shadows, remained steadfast, the eternal heartbeat of an ancient world. The afternoon waned, and a soft golden hue began to drape the Great Wall and the sprawling lands beneath it. The sunlight filtered through swaying pine branches, casting intricate shadows upon the worn stones that had stood for centuries. The air was warm but tinged with the cool promise of evening, carrying the sense of pine resin, dry earth, and distant smoke from village hearths. The sentries moved slowly along the battlements, their footsteps muffled by the thick dust gathered from endless patrols. Their worn cloaks fluttered gently in the light breeze, while their eyes, alert and patient, traced the horizon where the sky met the rolling hills. Their faces bore the quiet calm of men accustomed to long hours of watchfulness, tempered by a profound connection to this ancient line of defense. Their hands rested lightly on weapons long familiar, the polished wood of spears, the cool metal of sword hilts, and the taut strings of well-used bows. These instruments were extensions of their own will, tools honed by experience and necessity. Each movement, each careful adjustment of armor and gear, was a silent ritual, a bond forged through countless nights and days spent guarding the frontier. The wilderness beyond the wall stretched vast and unyielding, a dark sea of forest and mountain that held secrets older than memory. The rustle of leaves and distant calls of wildlife threaded through the air, subtle reminders of the wildness pressing close against the boundaries of empire. Within the watchtowers, lanterns remained unlit but ready, poised to cast their warm glow at the coming dusk. Fires smoldered low in their hearths, tended with care to kindle again when night fell fully. The sentries exchanged few words, their conversations measured and quiet, words carried on soft breaths that blended seamlessly with the surrounding stillness. Below, the villages awakened to the soft light of the descending sun, their inhabitants moving through familiar routines that balanced precariously between toil and tranquility. Smoke spiraled upward from chimneys, and the faint sounds of daily life, children's laughter, the clatter of tools, the distant bark of dogs, wove gently into the evening air. Time here was a slow, deliberate rhythm, measured not by clock or calendar, but by the steady turning of earth and sky. Each moment was a thread in an endless tapestry of watchfulness and quiet endurance. The sentries moved as part of this ancient pattern, guardians of a fragile peace balanced on the edge of wilderness and civilization. As the light softened further, casting long shadows that stretched like silent sentinels along the battlements, the sentries paused briefly to drink in the vast panorama before them. The great wall lay silent and eternal beneath the vast sky, a steadfast witness to the ceaseless passage of time and the enduring strength of those who stood watch. As the golden hues of late afternoon softened into the muted tones of early evening, a gentle calm settled over the great wall and the vast lands it guarded. The air cooled subtly, carrying with it the faint aroma of pine needles crushed underfoot and the distant smoke from hearth fires beginning to glow in village homes. The sky above deepened to a soft indigo, speckled faintly with the first timid stars of the coming night. The sentries continued their patrol with a quiet grace, their footsteps light but purposeful on the weathered stones. Their cloaks, now pulled tighter against the creeping chill, fluttered softly with each measured step. Their eyes, sharp yet patient, scanned the horizon where the fading light met the gathering shadows, ever alert to the slightest disturbance. Within the watchtowers, the warm flicker of lantern light began to cast gentle glows, revealing faces marked by long hours and steady resolve. Fires smoldered low, tended with careful hands, their faint crackle a comforting whisper in the growing stillness. The sentries exchanged few words, their voices subdued and respectful of the encroaching night. The wilderness beyond pressed close and dark, its depths alive with the muted sounds of nocturnal creatures awakening. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, and the subtle shift of shadows wove together into a quiet symphony that only the watchful could fully hear. The men stood as silent listeners, their senses attuned to every nuance, every breath of the ancient land. Weapons rested within easy reach, spears, swords, and bows, their surfaces worn smooth by years of careful use. These tools were more than instruments of war. They were extensions of the sentries themselves, symbols of a steadfast duty passed down through countless generations. Though weariness whispered at the edges of consciousness, the men held fast, their vigilance a silent oath to the wall and the land it protected. Thoughts of distant families and far-off homes flickered like shadows, fleeting and fragile, while their focus remained fixed on the present. The cold stones beneath their feet, the vast expanse before them, and the timeless watch entrusted to their care. As night fully embraced the land, the great wall stood bathed in moonlight, a silver ribbon winding across hills and forests, eternal and unyielding. The sentries, shadows among shadows, continued their slow, deliberate patrol, guardians of a peace forged in stone and silence. The world held its breath in this quiet moment, poised between past and future, light and shadow, stillness and the restless pulse of time. Though weariness touched their limbs and dulled the sharpness of their senses, the centuries pressed on, driven by the unyielding commitment to their duty. The Great Wall, ancient and immense, was more than stone and mortar. It was a living legacy, a silent witness to the countless souls who had devoted their lives to its protection. This sense of purpose lent strength even in the quietest, most solitary moments of the night. The horizon darkened steadily, the last embers of twilight fading beneath a vault of deep indigo. Stars began to emerge, delicate points of light piercing the vastness of the sky. The moon, pale and steady, cast a soft silver glow upon the stones, bathing the wall and the watchtowers in a gentle, ethereal luminescence. The sentries' breaths formed pale clouds in the cooling air as they continued their measured patrols. Their footsteps fell in rhythm with the slow, steady pulse of the night, a beat as old as the wall itself. Cloaked in shadow and silence, they were as much a part of the landscape as the ancient trees and rugged hills surrounding them. Lanterns were lit within the towers, their warm glow spilling softly through small windows and doorways. The flickering light wove golden patterns across rough stone and timber, casting dancing shadows that seemed to breathe alongside the men who tended the fires. The air was filled with the gentle crackle of flames, a comforting sound amid the vast stillness. Beyond the wall, the wilderness stirred quietly. The rustle of leaves, the distant cry of a lone owl, and the subtle shifting of nocturnal creatures formed an intricate soundscape. The sentries listened attentively, attuned to every nuance. The faintest disturbance could signal a threat, and vigilance was their shield. Their weapons, polished and ready, rested close at hand. The cold metal and smooth wood were reassuring in the dark, extensions of the sentry's own resolve. Eyes scanned the shadows, tracking shapes that danced just beyond clear sight. Each moment was a balance between calm and alertness, a delicate tension maintained through years of training and experience. Though isolated in their watch, the sentries found strength in the shared burden, their silent camaraderie unspoken yet deeply felt. The Great Wall stood between worlds, between order and chaos, light and darkness, and they were its steadfast guardians, bound by duty and history. As midnight deepened, the wall lay quiet and eternal beneath the vast night sky. The sentries remained vigilant, shadows standing watch over the fragile peace of the empire, their vigil a timeless thread woven through the endless tapestry of time. The night wore on, deep and unbroken, wrapping the Great Wall and its sentries in a quiet stillness that seemed to stretch infinitely. The moon sailed high in the sky, casting a cool, silvery light that illuminated the ancient stones, lending the landscape an otherworldly calm. The crisp air carried the faint scent of pine and cold earth, mingling with the subtle whispers of the forest beyond. The sentries moved with steady grace along the battlements, their footsteps soft but purposeful. Their cloaks, heavy against the chill, rustled gently in the night breeze, while their eyes, keen and unrelenting, scanned the dark horizon. The weight of their armor and weapons was familiar and grounding, a tangible reminder of the duty they bore. Lanterns flickered within the watchtowers, their warm glow casting dancing shadows that softened the harsh angles of stone and timber. Fires crackled low, the gentle sound a comforting companion in the vast expanse of night. The men tended their posts with practiced care, movements slow and deliberate, as if in tune with the ancient rhythm of the wall itself. Beyond the stone barrier, the wilderness stretched endlessly, a dark sea of trees and hills shrouded in moonlight. The night was alive with subtle sounds, the rustle of small animals in underbrush, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of wind threading through pine needles. Each sound was noted, every shift observed, a vital part of the sentry's vigilance. Though fatigue weighed heavily, the men remained alert, minds steady in the long hours. Thoughts drifted briefly to distant homes, to loved ones, to moments of peace now far away. Yet the present held firm, the cold stone beneath their feet, the steady rhythm of their breath, and the unyielding watch they kept. The Great Wall rose vast and eternal beneath the moonlit sky, a silent sentinel through the centuries. It bore witness to the countless lives interwoven with its history, the builders, the warriors, the watchers. Tonight, as every night, it stood resolute, held steady by those who embraced the quiet power of endurance. As the hours waned, the first pale blush of dawn began to touch the eastern sky, hinting at the slow return of light. The sentries continued their watch, shadows among shadows, guardians of a fragile peace poised between night and day. The stillness of midnight held the Great Wall in a deep and ancient silence, a quiet sanctuary carved by centuries of stone and will. Above, the moon sailed slowly across the vast expanse of night, its silver light spilling gently over the worn battlements and the rolling landscape beyond. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the faint scent of pine needles and damp earth, a mingling of wilderness and enduring stone that had witnessed the passage of countless seasons. The sentries moved with deliberate care, their footsteps softened by the thick layer of dust and moss that had accumulated over years of tireless vigilance. Their cloaks, heavy and worn, fluttered lightly with the faint breeze, while their eyes, sharp and watchful, scanned the horizon and the shadows beyond. Faces marked by endurance and quiet strength were set with calm determination, the weight of their duty carried with a steadfast grace. Each patrol was a measured journey through the slow rhythms of the night. The sentries traced the contours of the wall, their movements weaving a tapestry of silent motion across the ancient stones. Their senses were finely attuned to the subtle signs of the wild, the slight shift of a shadow, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant call of a nocturnal bird. These sounds, barely perceptible to any but the most practiced ears, formed an intricate symphony of life and vigilance. Within the watchtowers, the lanterns cast a warm, flickering glow, their flames dancing against rough timber and stone. The light wove a delicate pattern of illumination and shadow, revealing the quiet figures of those who tended the fires and kept the watch. Their voices were low and infrequent, murmured only in brief exchanges, preserving the sacred stillness of the night. The wilderness beyond the wall stretched vast and unknowable, a realm of darkness and mystery where ancient trees stood sentinel and the earth held secrets hidden beneath the blanket of night. The sentries understood this wildness, respected its power and unpredictability, for it was a living force that shaped the border between the known and the unknown. Weapons rested close at hand, their polished surfaces catching the lantern light in muted glints. Spears, swords, and bows, tools of defense and survival, were extensions of the sentries themselves, their presence a silent promise of protection and readiness. The men moved with a quiet confidence, honed through years of training and countless nights spent under the stars. Though fatigue sometimes pressed heavily upon their limbs, the sentries were buoyed by a profound sense of purpose. Their thoughts, when they drifted, touched on distant homes and the lives they had momentarily left behind. Yet always, they returned to the present, to the cold stone beneath their feet, the steady rhythm of their breath, and the unbroken watch they were sworn to keep. The Great Wall was more than a barrier. It was a living testament to human will and resilience. Its stones carried the weight of history, its battlements echoed with the footsteps of those who had come before. The sentries were the latest in a long line of guardians, bound by duty and legacy to stand firm against the passage of time and the encroaching wilderness. As the hours slipped slowly onward, the night deepened, thickening the shadows and sharpening the contrasts between light and dark. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant, their steady glow a reminder of the vastness that lay beyond human reach. The moon's path curved gently across the sky, tracing a slow arc that marked the passage of time with graceful inevitability. The sentry's watch continued, slow and unwavering, a heartbeat within the vast silence. Their eyes moved carefully over the darkened landscape, alert to every change, every nuance in the tapestry of shadow and light. The wilderness whispered its secrets, a language understood only by those who listened closely, and the sentries were its most attentive listeners. Occasionally, a soft sound would stir, a branch bending beneath the weight of a small animal, the faint movement of a creature slipping through the underbrush. These moments were fleeting yet profound, reminders of the delicate balance held along this boundary between order and wildness. The men's breathing was steady, their movements economical and precise. The cold metal of their weapons was reassuring beneath their fingers, the smooth wood of their spears a constant companion. Each step along the ancient wall was part of a rhythm that had persisted through countless generations, a slow dance of vigilance and endurance. The vast expanse of the wilderness pressed close but respectful, a silent challenge that had never been fully conquered. The sentries stood as bulwarks against the unknown, their presence a living testament to the fragile peace that hung in balance. Time itself seemed to slow in these moments, the endless stretch of night folding softly into dawn's first light, the world suspended between sleep and waking, shadow and illumination. The Great Wall was both anchor and threshold, a place where history and nature converged in silent harmony. The distant horizon began to lighten imperceptibly, a faint blush of pink and gold heralding the approach of day. The stars faded one by one, their cold fires dimming before the growing light. The moon retreated slowly, leaving the sky open to the soft embrace of morning. As the first rays of sunlight touched the stones, the sentries paused briefly to drink in the moment, a silent acknowledgement of the passing night and the promise of a new day. Their vigil was unending, woven through the fabric of time, a quiet song of endurance and hope. The Great Wall stood eternal beneath the dawn, its stones glowing warmly in the gentle light. The wilderness beyond was bathed in soft hues, alive with the stirring of creatures awakening from their slumber. The sentries resumed their patrol with steady hearts, shadows once more blending into the light. Their watch was far from over. The cycle continued, unceasing, steadfast, a rhythm that would persist as long as the wall stood, as long as the empire endured. Through seasons and centuries, through light and shadow, the sentries carried their burden with quiet strength, guardians of a fragile world balanced on the edge of time. The dawn stretched slowly across the horizon, bathing the Great Wall in a soft light that filtered through the morning mist like a delicate veil. The stones, ancient and steadfast, glowed warmly beneath the sun's first gentle rays, their weathered surfaces catching the light in subtle hues of ochre and gray. The vast landscape beyond, the forests, the rolling hills, and the distant villages, lay quiet and expectant beneath the awakening sky. The sentries began their day with steady, measured movements. Cloaked figures moved with practiced grace along the battlements, their footsteps echoing softly against the ancient stones. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the fresh scent of pine and moist earth, a fragrant reminder of the wilderness pressing just beyond the wall's edge. Each man bore the weight of his duty with a calm resilience, the long night's watch etched into his features but not dimming his focus. Faces, weathered and lined by seasons of vigilance, held a quiet dignity, a testament to the enduring strength required to stand sentinel over this vast boundary. Their eyes scanned the horizon with unwavering attention, tracing the delicate shifts of light and shadow that heralded the day's unfolding. Within the watchtowers, the fires kindled at night had long since died to glowing embers, and now new flames were coaxed to life with practiced hands. The lantern's warm glow once again mingled with the growing light of morning, casting soft reflections on wooden beams and stone walls. The quiet sounds of preparation, metal being oiled, leather straps tightened, and weapons carefully inspected, wove a gentle symphony of readiness. The wilderness beyond was a vast, living presence, dark forests that stretched into the distance, their canopy a tangled mosaic of leaves and branches. Hidden valleys where streams murmured softly, and distant hills that rolled endlessly toward the horizon. This untamed world pressed close to the wall, a reminder of the fragile line held by human hands and will. The sentries were attuned to every detail, the rustle of leaves stirred by a passing breeze, the distant call of a hawk circling high above, the soft murmur of life awakening in the villages below. These sounds were threads in the tapestry of the day, a subtle language of place and time understood through years of watchfulness. Their weapons were cared for with meticulous attention, the blades sharpened to a fine edge, the wooden shafts of spears polished smooth, the bows checked for tension and readiness. These tools were extensions of the men themselves, symbols of protection and survival. The connection was intimate, a silent promise that they would stand firm should the need arise. The wall itself was a monument to human determination, a vast and enduring structure carved from stone and earth. Its foundations were rooted deep in the landscape, intertwining with the natural contours of hills and cliffs. The stones bore the marks of countless hands, the scars of history written in chipped edges and weathered faces. They held the weight of time, steadfast and unyielding. Life along the wall was a rhythm of patience and persistence. The centuries moved in quiet harmony with the land, their presence a living thread woven through centuries of history. Each day was a continuation of an ancient duty, a slow unfolding of moments stitched together by vigilance and endurance. The villages nestled in the valleys below stirred with gentle activity. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin, curling streams, and the soft sounds of labor, with chopping water drawn from wells, voices exchanged in low tones, carried faintly upward on the morning breeze. This fragile peace was the heart of what the centuries guarded, a delicate balance maintained through quiet watchfulness. The sun climbed steadily, its light growing warmer and more insistent, the air filled with the sense of pine resin, fresh earth, and blooming wildflowers hidden among the undergrowth. The forests beyond the wall were alive with movement, the flitting of birds, the rustle of small mammals scurrying beneath the trees, and the distant rumble of a river threading through the landscape. The sentries' patrols continued with a steady, deliberate pace. Their footsteps echoed softly against the stone, a slow and steady rhythm that echoed the measured heartbeat of the land itself. Their eyes searched the horizon, alert to every subtle change. The shifting shadow of a cloud, the movement of a branch, the faint glimmer of light on water. Time moved differently here, measured not by clock or calendar, but by the natural rhythms of earth and sky. Each moment was both fleeting and eternal, a thread in the vast tapestry of existence. The centuries were part of this pattern, their lives woven into the fabric of the wall and the wilderness it bordered. As midday approached, the sun cast a brilliant light over the landscape. The stones of the wall warmed beneath its rays, and the air shimmered with heat. The sentries paused briefly to drink water from leather flasks and to rest in the shade of watchtowers. Their breaths were steady, faces calm but vigilant. The wilderness beyond was a study in contrasts. The lush green of forests against the stark stone of cliffs, the gentle flow of rivers beside the rugged terrain of hills. This boundary between cultivated land and untamed nature was a living, breathing place, where each day brought new challenges and quiet triumphs. The sentries' thoughts often drifted to the lives they protected, the families in distant villages, the children playing near streams, the farmers tending their fields. These images were a source of strength and purpose, a reminder of the fragile peace that depended on their steadfast watch. Throughout the afternoon, the wall stood silent and strong, a line drawn through time and space. The sentries moved with steady purpose, their presence a living testament to endurance and duty. Each step was a pledge, each breath a vow to stand firm against the unknown. As the sun began its slow descent, the light softened, casting long shadows that stretched across the stones and into the forests beyond. The air cooled, carrying the rich scents of earth and pine, mingled with the faint smoke of evening fires kindled in distant homes. The sentries continued their patrols, their eyes sharp and alert despite the lengthening day. The wilderness whispered its ancient secrets, a quiet song that wove through the trees and hills. The wall stood as a silent witness to this eternal dance, a place where history and nature met in fragile harmony. As dusk deepened, the first stars began to appear, twinkling softly against the darkening sky. The moon rose slowly, casting its pale light over the landscape, bathing the wall and its guardians in a gentle glow. The sentries paused briefly to take in the scene. A moment of stillness, a breath held between day and night. Their vigil was far from over. The cycle continued, unceasing and steadfast. The Great Wall remained a living monument to human will, its stones a silent witness to the endless passage of time. The sentries stood firm, shadows among shadows, guardians of a fragile peace balanced on the edge of the wild. As night fully embraced the land, the sentries prepared for the hours ahead. Lanterns were lit within the watchtowers, casting flickering light that danced upon rough stone and weathered timber. Fires crackled softly in hearths, their warmth a small comfort against the cool night air. The wilderness beyond stirred quietly, alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The sentries listened attentively, their senses sharp and ready. Their weapons rested close at hand, polished blades, sturdy spears, and taut bows, each a promise of protection and survival. Though weariness tugged at their limbs and minds, the sentries bore their burden with quiet strength. Their thoughts were steady, rooted in the present and the timeless duty they carried. Each heartbeat was a testament to endurance, each breath a pledge of vigilance. The Great Wall stood eternal beneath the vast night sky, its stones bathed in moonlight and shadow. The sentries remained vigilant, silent guardians at the boundary between worlds, between light and dark, order and wildness, past and future. Their watch was a slow, steady pulse, a quiet song woven through the fabric of time. The cycle continued, unbroken and unyielding, a living testament to the enduring strength of those who stood watch upon the ancient stones. The night deepened, folding the world into a vast tapestry of shadows and muted sounds. Above, the sky stretched endlessly, a canvas of velvety black punctuated by countless stars, each a distant sun, cold and untouchable, shining faintly through the dark. The moon hung high, a pale guardian casting silvery light upon the Great Wall and the land beyond, bathing the ancient stones in a soft, spectral glow. The sentries moved with slow deliberation, their steps measured and light upon the rough stone. Their cloaks whispered faintly in the gentle breeze that stirred through the towering pines, carrying the crisp scent of resin and cold earth. Faces, hardened and calm, bore the quiet weight of responsibility, eyes sharp beneath furrowed brows, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Each patrol was a ritual, a dance as old as the wall itself, where silence was both companion and shield. The sentries listened intently to the symphony of the night, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the faint scurry of small creatures among the underbrush. These subtle sounds were woven into the fabric of vigilance, signals in a language understood only by those who had long known the rhythms of the wilderness. Lanterns swung gently within the watchtowers, their flickering flames casting warm, trembling light upon rough timber beams and chipped stone walls. The glow softened the harsh edges of the fortress, bathing the figures within in a quiet, golden haze. Conversations were sparse, whispered words blending seamlessly with the night's hush, preserving the sacred calm. Beyond the wall, the wilderness lay vast and inscrutable, a realm where darkness reigned and ancient forces stirred unseen. The trees stood as silent sentinels, their branches swaying like ghostly hands in the breeze. The earth beneath was a tapestry of roots and rocks, hidden paths and secret clearings where shadows danced with the moonlight. The sentries' weapons rested within easy reach, the cold steel of swords, the polished wood of spears, and the taut strings of bows, each an extension of the men themselves. These tools were symbols of protection and survival, forged through years of training and tempered by countless nights under the stars. Despite the fatigue that tugged at their bodies, the sentries remained steadfast. Their minds were anchored in the present, the steady rhythm of their breath, the familiar weight of armor, the slow cadence of footsteps against stone. Thoughts of home and distant loved ones drifted like distant echoes, fragile yet sustaining. The Great Wall was more than mere stone. It was a living monument to endurance, a boundary between order and chaos, civilization and the wild. Its stones bore the marks of countless hands. Its battlements echoed with the footsteps of generations who had stood watch before. The centuries were the latest custodians of this legacy, bound by duty and history to hold the line. As the night wore on, the stars wheeled slowly overhead, their cold fires tracing ancient paths across the sky. The moon's light shifted, casting ever-changing shadows that played upon the battlements and the darkened forests beyond. The world seemed suspended between moments, still, eternal, and profound. A sudden rustle near the base of the wall drew the sentry's attention. Eyes narrowed, weapons gripped more firmly. A faint movement, perhaps the passing of a small animal, or a wandering wind disturbing leaves, passed unnoticed but underscored the fragile balance they maintained. Vigilance was both burden and necessity. The watch continued, slow and deliberate, a heartbeat in the vast quiet of the frontier. Each sentry was a shadow among shadows, a silent guardian in a world of mystery and menace. Their presence was a bulwark against the unknown, a quiet promise that the fragile peace held firm. As dawn's first light began to pale the sky, the sentries lingered in their post, savoring the fleeting moments before the world awoke. The Great Wall stood eternal beneath the awakening heavens, its stones glowing softly in the early light. The wilderness beyond stirred gently, the symphony of night yielding to the chorus of dawn. The cycle would begin anew, the endless watch continuing without pause. The sentries would remain, steadfast and vigilant, guardians of a boundary as old as time itself. Their watch was a slow, steady pulse that echoed through the ages, a testament to endurance, duty, and the fragile beauty of a world held in balance. The horizon blushed with the first tender hues of dawn, soft pinks and pale golds stretching slowly across the sky. The vast expanse of the Great Wall lay bathed in this gentle light, its ancient stones glowing with the quiet warmth of a new day. The night's shadows retreated, dissolving into the waking world as birds began their tentative songs, threading delicate melodies through the cool morning air. The sentries stood motionless for a moment, their gazes lifted to the horizon where earth met sky. The long hours of watchfulness had etched lines of quiet endurance upon their faces, but in their eyes there remained an unwavering steadfastness, a resolve tempered by the passing of countless nights beneath these endless skies. The air carried the mingled scents of pine resin, moist earth, and faint smoke drifting upward from the distant villages nestled in the folds of the hills. These villages, alive with the gentle stirrings of life, of farmers rising to tend their fields, children's laughter carried faintly on the breeze, and the rhythmic hammer of craftsmen at work, were the fragile heart of all that the Great Wall protected. Beyond the wall, the wilderness breathed softly in the dawn. The forests shimmered with dew, leaves glistening like scattered jewels. Streams murmured their ancient songs as they wound through hidden valleys. The land, vast and unyielding, was a place of endless cycles, birth, growth, decay, and renewal, an eternal rhythm that had carried the world through centuries uncounted. The sentries resumed their patrol along the battlements with steady steps. The weight of armor and weapons was familiar and grounding, a tangible connection to their solemn charge. Each footfall echoed faintly in the cool morning stillness, a heartbeat in the living monument of stone and earth. Their eyes traced the contours of the land, the distant hills fading into morning mist, the stretch of forest dark and dense, the small trails winding away from the villages into the wild. Each detail was a thread in the intricate fabric of the world they guarded, a delicate balance between civilization and the vast unknown beyond. The Great Wall itself was a testament to human perseverance, its stones worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain, its towers standing as silent sentinels against the passage of time. It was both shield and symbol, a boundary drawn not merely in earth and stone but in memory and will. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light over the landscape, the sentry's watch continued, not as a moment frozen in time, but as part of an unbroken continuum. Their vigilance was woven into the endless cycle of days and nights, seasons and years, a silent promise handed down through generations. Though the world beyond the wall was vast and wild, marked by uncertainty and change, the sentries held fast to their post. Their presence was a quiet force, a living bridge between the past and the future, between order and wilderness, between light and shadow. The rhythm of their watch was slow and deliberate, measured in breaths and footsteps, in the steady pulse of hearts bound by duty. Each moment was both fleeting and eternal, a single thread in the vast tapestry of history. As the day unfolded, life beneath the wall stirred fully awake. Villagers moved through their daily tasks, the fields shimmered with fresh growth, and the forests sang with the energy of life renewed. The great wall stood firm amidst it all, an enduring monument to human spirit and resilience. And so, beneath the ever-changing skies and the endless turning of the earth, the sentries remained silent guardians of a fragile peace, keepers of an ancient legacy. Their watch was a quiet song of endurance, echoing softly through the ages. In this place where stone met sky and wilderness touched civilization, the Great Wall stood eternal, its stones whispering stories of those who had come before and those who would come after. The cycle would continue, unbroken and unyielding, as long as there were those willing to stand watch. And now, as dawn's light fully embraced the land, the night's quiet vigil came to rest, softly, peacefully, without end.